When I turned 40, 14 years ago, I embarked on 2 inquiries that have shaped my life ever since. They were motivated by an imbalance and an incongruity that I perceived. One was something I felt deep within myself, and the other was much more outer or external. Inwardly, I realized that for all my professional life, I had acted and led mostly from my masculine side. I began an inquiry to understand what masculine and feminine even meant to me, and what characteristics and traits and aspects of myself I might understand in relation to each of them. I vowed that going forward, I would live more from my feminine side, because I believed that having access to the full spectrum of my human capacities would allow me to show up in the world in a more authentic, full, and effective way. Outwardly, I began being acknowledged publicly for my leadership. I knew that I should feel appreciated and honored, but instead I found I felt anxious and conflicted. My experience was corroborated by many other women when we began offering Cultivating Women's Leadership intensives. Women would call us up and say, well, sure, I want to dive in deep with a bunch of committed, engaged women, but I'm not so sure about this leadership thing. So I began to wonder about these important aspects of gender and leadership. I began to wonder whether some unconscious stories or cultural inheritance or definitions might be responsible for the incongruity and the imbalance that I was feeling. I noticed that outer attention was often much more highly valued than inner awareness or personal practice. I saw how left brain analytical and procedural thinking was typically more highly valued than right brain relational and innovative thinking. I saw that how consistently we value intellect over our emotional and embodied and intuitive ways of knowing. I began to realize that that imbalance that was true within me, I saw it in other people, and I saw it in our institutions and our social structures. I realized it might be the inheritance of a culture based around competition, hierarchy, and scarcity. So I wondered how bringing the full capacity of myself and each other to our leadership might actually be an appropriate response to this moment in the world. I knew from my many years with Bioneers and before that with Seeds of Change that diversity is about far more than political correctness. Nature having many, many options for adaptation is how nature ensures survival and mitigates against extinction. I knew that ecosystems that were rich in diversity rebound much more quickly after trauma. And I knew that systems that had less diversity were much, much slower to heal. And because human systems are a subset of nature's systems, I understood that if diversity is useful for nature and for survival, it's useful for us. I understood that if diversity enhances resilience in nature, it can do the same for us. So then I began to look at leadership through the lens of diversity. And I realized that we have understood leadership within a very narrow band. Actually, leadership in our cultural inheritance has been a monoculture and elitist. When I think of leadership, what I think of is people who are driven, isolated, stoical, and often behaving aggressively. Who among us wants to be that? I believe that what's called for in this pivotal time of giant ecological and social challenges is an uprising of leadership in us each and all, across sectors, across disciplines, across races and ages, and one that is strengthened by the full capacity of our diversity, both inwardly and outwardly. Now, we're not the first to attempt to achieve this gender balance thing. Many indigenous cultures have come from matriarchal roots, which does not mean women on top. Matriarchal cultures mean cultures that value both what the masculine and the feminine bring, so that together they combine to create a strong working society. And check this out. Do you know that the Earth is the only planet in our solar system from which the sun and the moon appear exactly the same size in the sky? The only planet from which an eclipse is even possible. Now, I don't know about you, but that sure seems like instructions to me. So I began to realize that what we are looking at here is an uprising of what I call full spectrum leadership. And I want to invite you to join me in that. Actually, first, let me share with you what my definition of leadership has come to be. I've come to understand leadership as finding that which you most love and value and connecting it with a real need in the world and acting from that. So here's my invitation to full spectrum leadership. To join me, I suggest that you give yourself permission to fall in love. And fall in love with a place, a people, could be kids, could be a cause, an organization, a creature, anything that really lights you up. And then give yourself to it in purposeful action. I suggest bringing yourself to it with all of the wisdom in this magnificent body, with the wisdom of our hearts, of our intellects, of our bodies, and of our intuition. I suggest bringing all of our aspects, from our discipline and rigor to our compassion and empathy, from left brain to right brain, from masculine to feminine, and everything in between. And lastly, I suggest we trust that exactly who we are is what's needed at this moment in the world. And here's the very best news. I suggest we do this not because it's right, though it is, and not because it's needed, though it surely is that. I suggest we do this because it's the most joyful, purposeful, and fulfilling way to live our lives. Won't you join me? Thank you. Thank you.